From the moment he was born, Buddy had never known what it felt like to look into the warm, loving faces of the family that cared for him. He was a dog trapped in darkness, navigating the world by scent and sound alone. Yet his golden fur and ever-wagging tail radiated a spirit that refused to be dimmed. Now, thanks to a groundbreaking procedure at the renowned Cornell University Hospital for Animals, Buddy stands on the threshold of a miracle, the chance to open his eyes and see his beloved family for the very first time. Get ready, this heartwarming journey will leave you in tears. Below is a comprehensive, heartfelt narrative spanning approximately 7,000 words. It is divided into chapters for clarity and depth, culminating in a closing section with a call to action. Prepare for an emotional journey of courage, hope, and love. Buddy first entered the world under a dark cloud, not just metaphorically, but literally. He was born in a cramped corner of a run-down backyard belonging to an overwhelmed hobby breeder who, despite having good intentions, lacked the resources to care for an unexpected litter. The air that day was stuffy and filled with the humid breath of late summer. A single bulb illuminated the space, casting more shadows than light. Among his siblings, Buddy stood out for reasons that were not immediately obvious. He was a wriggling, golden-haired pup who appeared healthy at a glance, his fur soft and lustrous, his small body warm and lively. Yet, unlike his brothers and sisters who found their way to their mother's milk by sight, Buddy never once opened his eyes. Instead, he crawled with purposeful determination, guided by instincts sharper than one might expect from a newborn. It took a few weeks for the breeder to notice something peculiar about Buddy. While the other puppies began to respond to shapes and movements, Buddy remained oblivious to visual cues. He would tilt his tiny head at every noise, perk up at the sound of rustling blankets or a kind human voice, but never tracked a waving hand or a flickering beam of light. Fearing that Buddy would be overlooked by potential adopters, or worse, euthanized at a shelter, the breeder reached out to a local rescue group. And that was how Buddy's path shifted toward a hope-filled new beginning, setting him on a course that would eventually bring him to the loving arms of the Jensen family. Miles away, in a suburban neighborhood dotted with trimmed lawns and neat picket fences, lived the Jensen family, composed of Michelle, her husband Peter, and their 9-year-old daughter Emma. They had been discussing the possibility of adopting a dog for well over a year. Emma's playful pleas for a furry companion were always met with thoughtful, measured replies. Both Michelle and Peter wanted to ensure that bringing a dog into their lives was a commitment they could uphold wholeheartedly. Emma dreamed of a 4-legged best friend, someone to greet her at the door after school, to run alongside her in the yard, and to cuddle with on rainy afternoons. Peter, who had grown up on a small farm, yearned to share with his daughter the unique bond that can form between humans and animals. Michelle, although never a dog person growing up, found herself warming to the idea. She imagined the lessons Emma might learn about empathy, responsibility, and unconditional love if she had a dog to care for and cherish. The one aspect that made them pause was time. Both Michelle and Peter had demanding jobs, Michelle as a high school guidance counselor and Peter as a local newspaper editor. Their schedules often stretched into early evenings. They worried, could they provide a dog the attention it deserved? After careful consideration, they decided to move forward, vowing to adopt from a shelter or rescue. Their hearts felt certain that a dog somewhere needed them as much as they needed it. They had no inkling, however, that the dog who would change their lives forever came with a special challenge: blindness. One Saturday morning, the Jensens arrived at Paws and Hope Rescue, where volunteers bustled around a small facility filled with kennels, crates, and the echoing chorus of excited barking. Emma dashed ahead, her eyes bright with excitement. The rescue coordinator, a kind woman named Teresa, greeted them warmly, explaining that they had several dogs needing homes, all with unique stories and personalities. She began showing them around, guiding them past the various kennels. Some dogs were older, with greying muzzles and weary eyes, while others were younger, yapping and jumping in the hope of immediate affection. Emma's heart ached for every single one, wanting to take them all home, but her parents reminded her that they had to find the right match. As they proceeded down a quieter corridor, Teresa paused at a large crate set slightly apart from the rest. "This is Buddy," she said softly. "He's a golden retriever mix about 3 months old, and he's blind." Emma felt a flutter in her chest. She crouched down, peering into the crate. A small golden pup lay curled at the back, seemingly uncertain of the visitors. Buddy lifted his head, sniffing curiously. With no visual cues to rely on, he gave a tentative wag of his tail at the sound of Emma's gentle voice. Michelle and Peter exchanged a look, both intrigued and concerned. A special needs puppy could be a challenge. They knew that, but as Emma carefully extended her hand and Buddy inched forward, guided by her voice, the connection felt undeniably strong. In that quiet moment, a spark of possibility ignited, one that would reshape their family's future. The Jensens spent time with Buddy in a small play area provided by the rescue. Emma was careful, moving slowly around him and speaking often so that Buddy could track her presence. Each time she laughed or spoke his name, his tail wagged wildly. Michelle watched, a lump forming in her throat at the sweetness of the interaction. Teresa explained Buddy's background and his potential needs. He had been born blind, possibly due to a congenital condition. There was uncertainty regarding whether any partial sight might develop later, but as of now, he would need an environment safe from hazards, no sharp furniture edges within easy reach, no clutter in hallways, consistent feeding spots so he could navigate confidently. Peter furrowed his brow in thought. They had prepared themselves to raise a puppy, but raising a blind puppy was an entirely new dimension of responsibility. "He'll need extra training," he murmured to Michelle. She nodded, recalling her own hectic work schedule. On the other hand, Emma was brimming with joy, already insisting, "I'll help. I promise I'll look after him every day." The rescue allowed them time to decide, but the more they interacted with Buddy, the more it felt like leaving without him was impossible. Despite the potential challenges, or maybe because of them, the family sensed that Buddy was more than just a dog. He was a lesson in patience, empathy, and perseverance, waiting to be learned. By the time they left the rescue, forms signed and adoption fees paid, Michelle's initial fears had been replaced by a cautious excitement. Buddy, carried gently in Peter's arms, wriggled and licked Emma's face, as if thanking them in advance for the love he was about to receive and return tenfold. Arriving at their suburban house, the Jensens introduced Buddy to the place he would now call home. They had purchased a soft dog bed, chew toys, and stainless steel bowls, carefully positioning everything so that Buddy could find them by memory. Emma was determined to guide him around each room, using gentle commands. She would say, "Step," whenever they encountered a rug edge, or "wall," when Buddy got too close to a corner. For the first few days, Buddy was timid, his nose constantly twitching as he tried to map every new scent. He knocked into table legs, once even stumbling into the lower shelf of a bookcase, prompting yelps of alarm from Emma. Each bump made Michelle's heart ache. She wasn't sure if Buddy was in pain or simply startled, but each time the puppy shook himself off, took a breath, and soldiered on with an almost brave innocence. Peter researched everything he could about blind dog training. He found specialized leashes, beeping collars, and tactile floor mats that could help Buddy navigate. He discovered online forums full of encouraging stories about blind dogs living fulfilling lives, learning commands like left, right, and stop with remarkable success. Meanwhile, Emma hovered near Buddy constantly, praising him each time he recognized a new command. On the second day, he seemed to recognize Buddy. "Come," and wagged his tail as he padded unsteadily toward Emma's voice. That little victory made the household glow with pride, reminding them that patience would be key and that Buddy was worth every effort. A week after Buddy settled in, Michelle took him to their regular veterinarian, Dr. Alvarez, for a thorough checkup. The small clinic, located near the center of town, was bustling with pet owners, from a man cradling a squirming kitten to an older woman accompanied by a panting Doberman. Buddy's nose worked overtime, capturing all the new scents in the waiting room: antiseptic cleaners, cat fur, and the faint aroma of dog treats. In the exam room, Dr. Alvarez conducted the usual checks: weight, temperature, heart rate. Then came a more detailed ophthalmic exam. Gently, he lifted each of Buddy's eyelids, shined a small beam of light, and observed carefully. Buddy remained still, though clearly perplexed by the bright sensation. Alvarez removed his gloves and sighed, looking at Michelle with a blend of sympathy and cautious optimism. "It's congenital," he explained, "likely the result of improperly formed lenses or corneas. I can't say for certain if it's treatable without more specialized tests. But sometimes, if the retinas are functional, surgeries at advanced centers like Cornell University Hospital for Animals could potentially restore partial or even full vision." Michelle's heart fluttered. Could Buddy ever see? She had assumed his blindness was a permanent condition. But Dr. Alvarez cautioned that such procedures were expensive and carried no guarantees. The best approach, he suggested, was to give Buddy time to grow and then revisit the possibility in a few months. Clutching Buddy's leash, Michelle left the clinic with newfound hope, albeit tempered by the realities of cost and risk. Little did she know that this sliver of possibility would soon lead them on an extraordinary journey. Back at home, the Jensens continued to adapt their daily routines around Buddy. Emma woke early to feed him and guide him into the backyard for bathroom breaks. The yard itself was a manageable space, but new obstacles cropped up regularly: garden hoses left out, a ladder leaning against the side of the house. Each misplaced object was a potential hazard for Buddy. Despite the occasional setback, like the time Buddy wandered too close to a thorny rosebush, his spirit never waned. He'd let out a small whimper when pricked, then cautiously shuffle away, learning from each experience. Emma began attaching jingle bells to her shoes so Buddy could track her footsteps wherever she went. This simple trick worked wonders, keeping Buddy focused on following the faint, pleasant tinkling sound. Michelle and Peter marveled at the bond forming between Emma and Buddy. She was patient in a way they hadn't often seen in other children her age. When Buddy struggled or got disoriented, Emma didn't scold or sigh. She crouched down, coaxed him gently, and often ended up hugging him with tears in her eyes. This unwavering compassion melted Michelle's heart, reminding her just how powerful it is for a child to care for an animal in need. One day, Buddy successfully maneuvered from the living room to his water bowl without any collisions. The entire family broke into spontaneous applause. Buddy, startled by the sudden noise, wagged his tail furiously, sensing that he had done something good. It was a little triumph, but for the Jensens it felt monumental. True to Dr. Alvarez's suggestion, the Jensens gave Buddy a few months to grow and acclimate. Over that time, his puppyish awkwardness gave way to a more assured, if still visually impaired, stride. He learned commands like find bed, slow and easy, revealing just how smart he was. Yet the question of possible vision, restoring surgery, lingered in the back of Michelle's mind. On quiet nights, she found herself researching success stories. She stumbled upon heartwarming accounts of dogs who had once lived in darkness, but, after surgical intervention at advanced veterinary hospitals, experienced the world with newly opened eyes. The name Cornell University Hospital for Animals surfaced repeatedly, praised for its cutting-edge research in canine ophthalmology. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Michelle mustered the courage to bring up the subject with Peter. They sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator their only soundtrack. "What if Buddy could see?" Michelle ventured, her voice trembling with cautious excitement. "The cost might be high, and it might not even work, but should we at least see if it's an option?" Peter took a moment, folding his hands thoughtfully. "I've seen how tough it can be for him to navigate. If there's a chance, any chance, that we can improve his life, we owe it to him to explore it," he agreed, though anxiety flickered in his eyes. Thus began a new chapter. Michelle wrote emails, made phone calls, and gathered Buddy's medical records. Eventually, Cornell responded with an invitation to bring Buddy for an in-depth evaluation. Whether or not he was a viable candidate was unclear, but that single invitation ignited a spark of hope in the Jensen household. When they learned the estimated costs for surgical procedures at Cornell, covering advanced imaging, preoperative care, and the surgery itself, the Jensens felt their excitement waver. The figure was daunting. As much as they loved Buddy, they couldn't ignore their own financial realities, mortgage payments, Emma's future college fund, everyday expenses. Michelle confided in her sister Laura, who immediately suggested, "Why not start a small fundraiser? People love dogs, especially one as sweet as Buddy. You never know who might be willing to help." At first, Michelle was hesitant, worried it might seem like she was asking for handouts. But her sister persisted, pointing out that Buddy's story could inspire others and the decision to help would be entirely voluntary. Emma helped design the fundraiser page, uploading a photo of Buddy with the caption, "Help a blind puppy see the world." She poured her heart into a short paragraph, describing Buddy's joyful nature and the dream of giving him the gift of sight. They posted the link on social media, expecting maybe a few friends and family members to chip in. To their astonishment, the response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Neighbors shared the post, local community groups rallied behind them, and within days, donations from people they'd never met began rolling in. Some gave large amounts, others gave smaller but meaningful contributions, often leaving heartfelt messages. Tears welled up in Michelle's eyes each time she read a new note, "Rooting for you, Buddy," or "I was moved by his story." Wishing him the best, the sense of community lifted the family's spirits, making them realize this wasn't just about a dog's surgery, it was about collective compassion. Early one morning in late spring, with the sun still low and the roads empty, the Jensens set off for Ithaca, New York. Buddy dozed in his crate, lulled by the car's motion, while Emma sat next to him, occasionally reaching in to stroke his fur. Michelle drove, navigating quiet highways and scenic routes, her thoughts a swirl of hope and lingering anxiety. Cornell University Hospital for Animals was a name revered among veterinary circles. She wondered what the building would look like, what the specialists would say, and how Buddy would handle a long day of tests. Peter, in the passenger seat, clutched a folder containing all of Buddy's medical records, his mind busy with possible outcomes. The farmland and rolling hills around Ithaca stretched for miles, bathed in a soft morning light. When the hospital complex finally came into view, modern architecture blending with the lush campus greenery, Michelle couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration. They parked and stepped out, accompanied by the crisp, cool air. Buddy lifted his nose, as if sensing something new and important in the wind. Inside, the reception area was bustling with pets of all kinds. A Great Dane with a bandaged paw, a nervous cat in a carrier, and even a parrot perched on a woman's arm. Among them, Buddy stood out for his calm curiosity, occasionally wagging his tail whenever someone spoke kindly to him. Emma clutched his leash, her eyes wide with the excitement of a new adventure. The stage was set for an assessment that could change Buddy's life forever. A veterinary technician greeted the Jensens, guiding them through winding corridors lined with framed photographs of animals that had been treated at Cornell. Eventually, they arrived at an examination room where they met Dr. Marjorie Chandler, an ophthalmology specialist, whose warm smile instantly put them at ease. "Doctor." Chandler knelt down to Buddy's level, softly introducing herself. Buddy responded with a brief sniff and an amiable wag of the tail. As she rose, Doctor Chandler shook hands with Michelle, Peter, and Emma, explaining her background in canine ophthalmic surgery. "I've reviewed the records you sent," she said, "and I'm hopeful. But we need to run further tests to be sure." She explained each test: an electroretinogram to gauge the activity of Buddy's retinal cells, ultrasound imaging of his eyes, and possibly an MRI to check for any neurological anomalies. The detail was overwhelming, but Dr. Chandler's compassionate demeanor eased the Jensens' worries. She also warned that while these surgeries can indeed restore vision, success rates vary depending on the underlying cause. Emma listened attentively, her arms around Buddy. She seemed determined to understand every word, as if her willpower alone could guarantee a successful outcome. Dr. Chandler commended her for caring so deeply. "Your support will be crucial for Buddy," she said, smiling at Emma. "Dogs sense love more profoundly than we often realize." With that, Buddy was gently led away for preliminary imaging. Michelle and Peter exchanged a hopeful glance. They knew that whatever happened next, they had done everything they could to give Buddy this chance. The waiting area for specialized tests was quieter than the main lobby. A few anxious owners sat with their pets, reading brochures or scrolling through phones to pass the time. Emma, however, couldn't focus on anything else. She paced, jingle bells still attached to her shoes. She had insisted on wearing them, even for this trip, their soft tinkling echoing with each nervous step. Peter tried to distract her. He brought up topics like school or summer plans, but her gaze drifted to the door through which Buddy had disappeared. Michelle understood her daughter's restlessness. She herself felt it, a persistent knot in her stomach that refused to loosen. After what felt like an eternity, though it was merely a couple of hours, Dr. Chandler emerged with an encouraging smile. "Buddy's retinas show some level of function," she explained. "The shape of the lenses is definitely abnormal, which likely caused blindness from birth. However, the structures that process light signals seem to have potential." Emma exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Doctor," Chandler continued, "the next step is to see if he's a good candidate for lens replacement surgery. We'll need to confirm that the optic nerves and retinas can handle visual input. If that looks good, we can proceed. But keep in mind, it's a delicate operation and success isn't guaranteed." Although still an uphill climb, hope flickered brighter. Emma swore she could sense Buddy's determination, even though he was still away, sedated for the final scan. She told herself, if he's come this far, why not believe in a miracle? A week later, the Jensens received the call from Dr. Chandler. Buddy was indeed a suitable candidate. The tests revealed that while his eyes had never properly formed the lenses, his overall eye structure and neural pathways held enough promise. "We can remove the non-functional lens material and place artificial lenses," Dr. Chandler said. Over the phone, her tone cautiously optimistic. "He'll need time to adapt, and the vision he gains might not be perfect, but there's a real chance he'll be able to see at least partially." The conversation sparked a flurry of emotions: relief, excitement, and a renewed surge of fear. The cost was still significant, even with the successful fundraiser, and the recovery process would be intense. Buddy would need specialized eye drops, careful monitoring, and a protective cone to keep him from scratching or rubbing his eyes. There was also the risk of infection or rejection of the implants. Yet, the pros outweighed the cons in the Jensens' hearts. They had watched Buddy navigate the world with unbreakable resilience. If there was a pathway to give him the gift of sight, how could they not try? Emma, who had overheard the phone call, gently touched Buddy's head. She whispered, "You're going to see me one day, Bud, and I'll be the first face you see." With that decision made, the family prepared for the next big trip to Cornell. Surgery was scheduled 2 weeks from that call, a window of time to gather their courage, finalize logistics, and brace themselves for the delicate procedure that might redefine Buddy's entire existence. In the days leading up to the surgery, the Jensen household buzzed with a mix of excitement and nerves. Emma busied herself by laying out a vision bucket list for Buddy, a list of all the sights she hoped he would experience once he could see, like the colorful flowers in their garden, a bird perched on the fence, or the bright red balloon she tied to her mailbox on special occasions. Michelle spoke with Dr. Chandler multiple times, clarifying pre-surgery protocols. Buddy was to avoid certain medications, refrain from eating after midnight on the day of travel, and remain calm to keep his blood pressure stable. The local vet, Dr. Alvarez, also offered encouragement, reminding them that Buddy was healthy, young, and resilient, factors that could only help his chances. Peter arranged time off work, setting up his phone to handle urgent matters remotely so he could be fully present. He also updated the online fundraiser page, letting supporters know about the impending surgery. Kind messages poured in: prayers, well wishes, even handmade cards from children who had followed Buddy's story. On the evening before they departed for Ithaca, the family gathered around Buddy in the living room. Emma combed through his golden fur, humming softly. Michelle and Peter sat quietly, each immersed in thoughts of what tomorrow might bring. Would Buddy awaken to a dazzling, bewildering world of shapes and colors? Or would fate deal them a harsh lesson in dashed hopes? One thing was certain: they would face whatever came next as a family. Dawn broke over a pastel sky as the Jensens loaded Buddy into their SUV for the second trip to Cornell. The roads were far less intimidating than they had been the first time. Familiar farmland and rolling hills felt almost comforting. Still, the hum of the engine seemed to resonate with the family's collective tension. Buddy snuggled in a soft crate, periodically sticking his nose out to catch the morning air. Arriving at the hospital, they were greeted by a veterinary staff member who already recognized Buddy from his prior visit. With gentle efficiency, she guided them through the admission process, completing final paperwork, verifying anesthesia protocols, and briefing them on what to expect post-operation. In the exam room, Dr. Chandler arrived with scrubs and a reassuring smile. She performed a quick set of pre-op checks: heart rate, temperature, reflex tests, each met with Buddy's calm compliance. "He seems ready," she remarked, and her words seemed aimed as much at the Jensens as at the dog. The moment came to hand Buddy over. Emma stooped down for one last hug, whispering, "Be brave, Buddy. I love you." Her eyes glistened with tears she tried not to show. Michelle and Peter took turns stroking Buddy's fur, their hearts tight with unspoken fears. Then the doors swung shut behind the team, leaving the Jensens in a hallway that felt both comforting and stark. They had done everything possible. Now it was up to science, skilled hands, and perhaps a touch of fate. The waiting room at Cornell University Hospital for Animals was far from quiet, but for Michelle, Peter, and Emma, it felt like they were in a vacuum. Other families came and went with their pets, some wagging happily, others limping or cradled in arms. Conversations rose and fell around them. Time dragged in excruciating slow motion. Emma fiddled with the jingle bells on her shoes, a nervous habit that set a soft, tremulous rhythm in the background. Michelle scrolled through her phone aimlessly, reading the same messages of encouragement from friends over and over. Peter stared at an informative poster about canine cataracts, but absorbed none of the words. After what felt like an eternity, though the wall clock revealed it had been just under 3 hours, Dr. Chandler appeared, her cap still on and her face tired but determined. Michelle felt her heart leap into her throat. The veterinarian approached them, pulling down her mask. "The surgery went as planned," she said, her voice calm yet tinged with relief. "We removed the malformed lens tissues and placed the artificial ones successfully. Buddy handled the anesthesia well, and we've stabilized him in post-op. Now the main concern is recovery and infection risk." Emma let out a half laugh, half sob. "So, he's okay?" she choked. "Doctor." Chandler placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "So far, so good," she replied. "He's resting now. We'll know more about his vision in the days ahead. Once the inflammation goes down." The wave of relief that washed over the family was profound, but it was tempered by a new sense of waiting. Buddy's real journey toward potential sight was just beginning. Buddy remained in the hospital overnight, sedated and under close watch. Each hour, a nurse checked his vitals, administered pain medication, and applied antibiotic eye drops to prevent infection. He wore a protective cone around his neck, giving him a comical yet heartbreaking appearance, like a small, golden satellite dish. The Jensens were allowed a brief visit in the late afternoon. Walking through the softly lit recovery area, they found Buddy in a spacious kennel lined with blankets. Though groggy, he perked up at the sound of their voices, tail thumping lightly. Emma leaned in close, softly calling his name. His ears twitched, acknowledging her presence, but his newly operated eyes remained partly closed behind protective bandages and layers of ointment. "Doctor." Chandler joined them, explaining the next steps. "We'll monitor pressure in his eyes, ensure the implants remain stable, and keep him calm," she said. "Sight, if it does come, might not be immediate. It's as if his brain has to learn to interpret the signals." Emma slipped her hand through the kennel bars, letting Buddy sniff her fingers. "We're here," she whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Michelle rested a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder, while Peter offered quiet words of encouragement to Buddy. Leaving him there, even in expert care, was a painful act of trust. The hospital corridor felt solemn as they walked out, hearts heavy yet buoyed by the knowledge that the hardest part surgery was done. Now they could only hope and wait for the morning light to bring better news. 2 days later, Buddy was cleared to go home, though Dr. Chandler emphasized he would still require diligent aftercare, frequent eye drops, careful observation, and minimal physical stress. The entire staff seemed to have fallen in love with him, praising his sweet disposition even while partially sedated. The drive back felt lighter, the worry receding slightly as Buddy napped in Emma's lap. He was still wearing the cone, and protective bandages covered portions of his face, leaving only small openings where his new lenses resided. Emma whispered soothing words, occasionally giggling when Buddy attempted to wiggle closer to her for warmth. At home, they set up a calm, quiet space in the living room, pushing aside furniture to create open pathways. Michelle spread soft blankets on the floor, and Peter blocked off the more hazardous corners. They wanted Buddy's reintroduction to be as stress-free as possible. As Buddy stepped onto the familiar hardwood, he paused, lifting his head as if detecting changes. Perhaps the light in the windows, once meaningless, now registered as a faint glow. He remained cautious, however, sniffing the air. Emma guided him gently, repeating "easy, easy," as they'd done countless times before. It might have been Michelle's imagination, but she swore she saw Buddy's eyes flutter open a sliver, reacting to the bright afternoon sun. Her heart soared at the thought. Maybe the process had begun. Over the next days and weeks, they would discover the true extent of Buddy's vision and witness an emotional awakening that would surpass all expectations. The first few days post-surgery were a blur of eye drop schedules, medication doses, and hushed excitement whenever Buddy gave the slightest indication of seeing. Initially, his eyes remained sensitive. He would blink rapidly, shying away from direct light. The Jensens set up soft lamps instead of overhead lights, keeping curtains drawn during the brightest part of the day. Buddy moved with tentative steps, no longer relying purely on smell and sound, but also on something new and disorienting, shapes and shadows. More than once, he seemed startled by everyday objects, a chair leg, a laundry basket, reacting as though they had materialized out of thin air. Emma was his patient guide, announcing objects in his path with a gentle "watch out" or "step here." Occasionally he bumped into corners, still wearing his cone, and let out a frustrated whine. Michelle and Peter encouraged him with treats and soft praises. Each small sign of progress, like the time he clearly followed Emma's moving hand, felt like a tiny miracle. On the fourth day after returning home, Buddy stood in the living room, blinking in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through a window. Emma called his name from across the room. Instead of merely following her voice, Buddy tilted his head and visibly focused his gaze in her direction. He took a few unsteady steps, tail wagging. Emma let out a gasp, tears springing to her eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was there, a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of sight. They were witnessing the dawn of a new world for Buddy, and it was breathtaking to behold. With newfound vision, Buddy also encountered a new kind of fear, visual overstimulation. The swirling shapes of a ceiling fan, the sudden flash of a TV screen, and even someone walking past a window could startle him. Before surgery, these things existed only as vague sounds. Now they loomed like unpredictable moving specters. Emma noticed how Buddy would sometimes freeze at the threshold of the kitchen, staring at the checkerboard tile floor as though it were a bottomless pit. She approached him carefully, speaking softly to remind him that it was just the same floor he'd walked across countless times in darkness. Slowly, he would place a paw forward, testing the solidity before moving on. Progress came in small victories one day. Buddy walked confidently from the living room to his food bowl without skidding to a stop midway. Another time, he actually seemed to track a ball rolling across the floor, albeit clumsily. Each success built on the last, and each meltdown, like when the vacuum startled him, was met with kindness and patient reassurance. The Jensens recognized that Buddy was relearning his entire environment. The once familiar smells and sounds were now accompanied by an unfamiliar visual dimension. Instead of chiding him for being cautious, they embraced a mindset of empathy. Day by day, Buddy's stride grew more assured, as if each shadow became a friend rather than a foe. It was an emotional transformation, not just for Buddy, but for every member of the family witnessing his bravery. Watching Buddy's progress had a profound impact on the Jensens. Michelle, who often felt run down from her job as a guidance counselor, found renewed faith in perseverance. Each time Buddy conquered a new hurdle, like stepping off the front porch without stumbling, she thought of her students who struggled with various challenges. If a small dog could overcome lifelong obstacles, she reasoned, what might her students accomplish with the right encouragement? Peter, juggling his responsibilities at the newspaper, found solace in Buddy's cheerful determination. Work deadlines and local politics suddenly felt less daunting when he compared them to the miracle unfolding at home. He started writing a personal blog, Buddy's First Sight, documenting each milestone. The blog gained traction, drawing readers who found hope and inspiration in Buddy's story. And then there was Emma. She had loved Buddy from the moment she laid eyes on him at the rescue center, blind and vulnerable. Now, she saw him truly see her for the first time, and the joy was overwhelming. She channeled that emotion into her schoolwork, writing essays about resilience and empathy. Her teacher, moved by her heartfelt accounts, encouraged Emma to present Buddy's story during a class assembly on kindness. In quiet evenings, the family would gather on the couch, Buddy nestled between them, happily dozing or lazily gnawing on a toy. The hum of the television or the rustle of the evening breeze no longer scared him. Michelle would glance at Peter and Peter at Emma, and in those silent exchanges, they confirmed what they already knew. Adopting Buddy was the best decision they had ever made. 3 weeks post-operation, the Jensens drove Buddy back to Cornell for a scheduled follow-up. This time, the atmosphere in the car felt triumphant rather than fraught with anxiety. Buddy sat upright in his crate, occasionally peering through the wire door at passing vehicles. Emma giggled whenever he cocked his head, as if trying to make sense of the moving blur outside. Inside the hospital, the staff greeted Buddy like an old friend. Technicians cooed over how alert he appeared and how bright his eyes looked. Dr. Chandler arrived, still in her white coat, a stethoscope draped around her neck. "I've been waiting to see how our superstar is doing," she said, ushering them into an exam room. The checkup involved careful evaluation of Buddy's eyes, using an ophthalmoscope to inspect the implants, measuring ocular pressure, and observing his responses to light. Each test Buddy handled with minimal fuss, though he squirmed a bit when the lights flashed too brightly. After the examination, Dr. Chandler smiled, her relief palpable. "The implants are stable. No signs of infection or excessive inflammation," she announced. "His responses indicate he has functional vision, likely still developing, but it's there." Emma clapped her hands, eliciting a small bark of excitement from Buddy. Dr. Chandler cautioned them that some dogs take longer to adapt, and that Buddy's final level of vision might not be 20/20ths. But the improvement was undeniable. The Jensens thanked Dr. Chandler profusely, their gratitude swelling with each piece of good news. They left the hospital that day brimming with a renewed sense of wonder at the possibilities life can offer. Over time, the incremental changes in Buddy's behavior coalesced into a major turning point. One afternoon, Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, finishing a drawing for school. Buddy roamed nearby, sniffing at furniture corners, but also taking frequent glances in Emma's direction. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks, gazing right at her. Emma felt the hairs on her arms stand up. It was as though, in that moment, Buddy recognized her face for the very first time, not just as a familiar scent or voice, but as a distinct visual entity. His tail began wagging in big, sweeping arcs. A quiver of excitement rippled through his body. Emma burst into tears, letting the crayons roll from her lap. She whispered, "Buddy, can you see me?" He took a few steps forward, then almost lunged into her lap. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart pound against her chest. When she pulled back, his eyes were locked onto hers, and the connection was electric, like two souls finally meeting in a new dimension. Michelle, walking into the room at that moment, gasped. She reached for her phone to capture the moment, but quickly lowered it, not wanting to break the spell. Emma looked up at her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, and said, "He sees me, Mum. He really sees me." In the hush of that living room, the significance was clear. Buddy's new vision transcended the physical. It was a bond of genuine recognition that touched everyone who witnessed it. Now that Buddy could navigate the house with growing confidence, the next step was tackling the great outdoors. The Jensens had a fenced backyard, but it was filled with new visual stimuli, trees swaying, birds fluttering, and the neighborhood cat prancing along the fence. Buddy's reaction was a mix of curiosity and caution. Emma attached the jingle bells to her shoes again, though they were no longer strictly necessary. She led Buddy through the back door, stepping onto the grassy lawn. For a moment, Buddy stood still, watching the sunlight dance on the leaves overhead. Michelle wondered what must be going through his mind. Had he ever imagined the sky above him was so vast, or that the lawn he had sniffed 100 times was actually green and dotted with dandelions? He moved slowly, nose to the ground, but eyes flickering up occasionally to track a rustling branch or a passing squirrel. Emma laughed in delight when Buddy tried to chase the squirrel. He managed a few enthusiastic leaps before losing sight of the small creature. Still, the sheer exuberance in his motion was a sight to behold. Over the next weeks, Buddy's confidence grew. He discovered the butterfly bush in the corner, stared at clouds drifting across the sky, and learned how to run short distances without stumbling. Every day felt like an unveiling, as if the world was unveiling its vibrant tapestry before Buddy's eager eyes. For the Jensens, these moments were not just new experiences for Buddy, they were profound reminders of the everyday miracles that sighted individuals often take for granted. The story of Buddy's surgery and recovery spread beyond the Jensen household. Peter's blog posts, initially intended for friends and family, started to receive more traffic from people across the country who resonated with the tale of a blind dog gaining the gift of sight. Messages poured in, some from individuals who had special needs pets, others from people simply inspired by Buddy's resilience. Local media took notice as well. A small community paper reached out, requesting an interview and a photo shoot. Emma was over the moon when they came to snap pictures of Buddy in the backyard, chasing dandelion fluff or staring curiously at the camera lens. The article, titled "A Second Chance to See: One Family's Journey to Bring Their Blind Puppy into the Light," featured on the front page of the local section. Neighbors, who had barely known the Jensens, began stopping by with treats or toys, hoping to meet Buddy. The veterinarian, Dr. Alvarez, mentioned that people inquired about surgeries for their own pets after reading Buddy's success story. Michelle took the opportunity to remind everyone that not every condition is treatable and that every dog deserves love, sight or no sight. Perhaps most touching were the letters from children, some with their own physical or developmental challenges, who saw Buddy's triumph as proof that hurdles can be overcome. In the simple act of regaining vision, Buddy had become a beacon of hope, teaching lessons about empathy, perseverance, and the boundless capacity of the human and canine spirit. About 2 months post-surgery, Emma convinced her parents to take Buddy to a nearby park known for its gentle walking paths and open green fields. With Buddy's confidence growing daily, it felt like the right time to introduce him to a broader expanse of the world. The moment they arrived, Buddy seemed enthralled by the chorus of new scents and sights. Children ran across the playground, parents pushed strollers along winding paths, and the distant shimmer of a duck pond caught the midday sun. Buddy's eyes darted here and there, taking in an array of stimuli he'd never experienced in such detail. They found a quiet spot under an old oak tree. Emma held Buddy's leash while he scanned the surroundings, occasionally wagging his tail at passing joggers or the curious beagle who trotted by. At one point, a gust of wind scattered leaves across the grass. Buddy leapt playfully, pawing at the dancing shapes, inciting laughter from a nearby family. Peter took a series of photos, Buddy with ears perked, nose lifted to sniff the breeze, or lying contentedly at Emma's feet. One picture, in particular, captured Buddy's gaze aligned perfectly with Emma's, both pairs of eyes shining with unspoken understanding. By the time they returned home, Buddy's energy was all but spent, yet his happiness was unmistakable. That afternoon at the park stood as a testament to how far he had come, from stumbling in darkness to frolicking under the sun, side by side with the humans who loved him more than words could convey. Life settled into a new normal, a beautifully enriched normal, where Buddy greeted each morning with an eagerness that was distinctly different from before. No longer purely reliant on smell and sound, he now reveled in the visual tapestry that made up his home, the pattern on the living room rug, the sunlight that painted shapes on the walls, and, most importantly, the faces of the family who adored him. For Emma, Buddy's transformation cemented her own growth. She had learned to nurture, to wait patiently, and to celebrate small victories that blossomed into life-altering changes. At school, she shared Buddy's story in a presentation on perseverance, prompting tears and a standing ovation from her classmates. She discovered that compassion wasn't just an emotion, it was a guiding principle that could unite communities. Michelle and Peter often reflected on how Buddy's arrival had reshaped their outlook on life. Their days felt more purposeful, their hearts more open. They witnessed how a challenge can become a triumph when met with love, dedication, and a refusal to give up. Even the memory of those anxious hours in the veterinary hospital had become a reminder that hope can conquer fear. In essence, Buddy was still the same sweet-spirited dog they had known from day one. Yet, he was also forever changed, no longer confined to a shadowy world, but free to see, explore, and embrace life's vibrancy. And in doing so, he taught the Jensens and everyone who followed his story that when given the chance, miracles can and do happen. That concludes the remarkable journey of Buddy, the once blind puppy whose unwavering spirit and life-changing surgery brought him a whole new world to explore. From those timid first steps in total darkness to his triumphant romps in the backyard and afternoons at the park, Buddy's story is a testament to how love, perseverance, and the generosity of a caring community can transform impossibility into hope. If Buddy's heartfelt story moved you, we invite you to like this video to show your support for animals overcoming challenges. Share Buddy's journey with your friends and family because everyone deserves a reminder that compassion can spark miracles. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting and inspiring stories that showcase the unbreakable bond between humans and their beloved pets. Thank you for joining us on Buddy's incredible adventure. Here's to celebrating the resilience of the canine spirit and the people who believe in second chances.